even with all of its imperfections, because I see it and it brings me joy. And that's important, that I can look at it and go, yeah, it's not perfect. I love it. I'm proud of it. It brings back a lot of happy memories. Well, I was quilting on my own. I'd learned via YouTube and things like that how to sew, and I didn't have a community of people to share how much I enjoyed quilting with. And I'd heard about retreats, and I was watching the retreats that were coming through at Missouri Star, and I hadn't found anybody to go with me. And then an opportunity came up where Jenny was actually leading a retreat, which was, unusual. And so I just said, I don't care if I don't go with anybody, I'm just going. And that brought me to Hamilton. And part of the reason why I wanted that so much is that I didn't have anybody to share it with. And I'm a really social person. And I loved what I was doing, but I wanted that community. I wanted friends. I wanted all of that. And coming to Missouri Star, I thought I'd have fun at a retreat and meet a few people. And of course, it ended up being so different than I expected, because here I am 9 years later, and I come back every year with the same friends who I met at that very first retreat when we were strangers. And we talk all year long on Facebook, and I got exactly what I wanted, which was the community that I needed to make quilting complete for me,
So it's all about the community for you.
That's really important. And definitely another aspect of it is the act of taking what I make and giving it to the people that I love. Most of what I do is gifts. Every once in a while I actually get to keep something for myself. But I love, whatever it is, baby quilt, a bed quilt for somebody, a pretty wall hanging, something that's exciting, or learning how to make a bag and making one for every woman in my family for Christmas, and customizing it to fabric that, for the horse lover and the Peanuts Christmas, movie lover, and things like that. It's really special, and that's something they'll always have. And I mean, some of those things are just quick and easy, but I know how much it matters that it's something that you made. So that's a really big part of it for me too, is sharing what I make. Well, for the most part, I do gift them, but I do have a few special ones that I've kept. The first quilt I ever made, which of course everyone will tell you has humble beginnings, and I did learn early on that when anybody is looking at a quilt you've made, to never point out the flaws, to accept the praise that somebody gives you, and don't say, oh yeah, but look how it's crooked and the points don't match, and all that stuff. And I proudly hang it on my wall, and say, I made this, and I actually saved scraps from that very first quilt, and in 2022 I used up the very last of them in a quilt that is on my bed. The first quilt I ever made to actually stay on my bed, and it's still there in 2024. So it's really special to me to be able to see a couple of those pieces, mixed in through the quilt that I go, that's from my first quilt. I'd always wanted to do an Irish chain quilt. I have Irish heritage. And so one of the things I did during the pandemic, when we were all home so much, was I said, this is it, I'm doing this, I'm making this for me. And that was really neat to be able to, to do that. And I really enjoy having that. I actually have that one on a guest bed in the house. And it's really neat to have that too, so. I'd say probably like most people, binding is not my favorite thing to do. I do completely sew everything by machine. I used to stitch the back on by hand. It's strange. I really like handwork. I like embroidery, and I like adding embellishing, and I cross-stitched forever. But there's something about the binding that's just not my favorite thing. So go figure. I'm like everybody else. Starting a new quilt. I love that excitement when if you're buying the fabric or you're pulling it out of your stash and you're reading the directions for the first time and you're making that first block, you know, because you don't cut all the fabric to begin with. You make one block and you make sure that you haven't made any mistakes and you understood it correctly before you cut everything up and find out for a king size quilt that it's not going to work out, you know. And so that first experience, you know, where it comes out and you figure out what you need to make it, that's the most fun to me. I enjoy, you know, starting from a pattern and then, you know, potentially making it my own and making modifications. You know, maybe you make the quilt, but you make it smaller and then you do something really fancy with the border. Just, you know, you just kind of let your creativity take over, but it's from a safe place. Of quilting, it's going to be in my 30s because, again, nobody in my family quilted. My grandmother sewed, and so she made us Halloween costumes, and she made me, we had very strict requirements for what we had to wear for our choral concerts in high school, and so she made the clothes for me to wear for that, you know, and different things like that. So my earliest memories of sewing are grandma in her sewing room making things for us. But then my earliest memories of quilting, that's something I've brought to my family. And I think a lot of people have learned how to appreciate because I've brought that to them, you know, and now everybody wants a quilt. And so that's neat. But yeah, it was just always an interest in sewing. And again, using YouTube to teach me how. So thanks, Jenny. Absolutely. So I was a Girl Scout leader for 12 years, and I really wanted to share that experience because it was so new to me, and again, it wasn't something I had an opportunity to learn as a kid. So I took the girls to a fabric store, and I taught them how to, you know, select fabrics that would coordinate together. And they each had to go up to the cutting counter and they had to order, I need a 1/4 yard of this, I need a yard of that, right? So that they got the experience of what it was like to select their own fabric. And then, you know, we went back and the girls worked on machines and they made the burrito pillowcases that Jenny did a tutorial on, right? And that was really neat to be able to, you know, share that with them. And some of them loved it and some of them were like, you know, okay, but of course that's what Scouts is about anyway, is exposing them to, you know, a ton of different things. And of course, my nieces, you know, have been sewing forever with Aunt Heather and enjoyed it so much that I bought them a sewing machine for Christmas one year so they could, you know, do their own thing. So I really enjoy, because I'm so excited about it, being able to share that with my own generation, because I do think there's a lot of people my age who were not exposed to sewing, and you know, I want them to feel like, hey, come and learn with me, you know, because it's not as hard as you think. But then, of course, always kids. You know, I definitely want them to have the opportunity to be exposed and learn the creative side. You know, I let my nieces, once they had been doing it for a couple of years and they were really safe. You know, I just said, take my scraps and do whatever you want with them. You know, they were making these really wonky skirts for their elf on a shelf, you know, and then one of them, she started, she took like yellow fabric and she just started stitching and she made like a smiley face out of the fabric and she brought it over and I went, oh, you invented applique! You know, because she'd use these different pieces and I was so proud. I didn't teach her that. She just sat down at a sewing machine and she was confident enough to be creative. And I mean, I was so proud. I was so proud of, you know, what she did. And the next thing you know, it's, can we make a Christmas stocking for the new dog we just adopted? And, you know, will you help me make a purse? And yes, so excited. I'm getting goosebumps. I'm so excited to share that. Yes, and it's Jenny's advice because it was transformative for me as a beginning quilter when I heard her say this for the first time, and that is that finished is better than perfect. It freed me in a lot of ways. It helped me to be less harsh with myself when I was, you know, just making mistakes in the beginning. And, you know, I'd make a block and I'd go, well, why isn't this thing square, you know? And it gave me permission to be proud and like what I had made, even though it was imperfect. And actually, in fact, I was so excited the very first retreat that we did here, and I was very, beginner quilter at that point. I'd maybe done 1, maybe 2 quilts at that point. So I got excited and I wanted to make the Missouri Star, right? With your logo colors and everything. And so I watched the tutorial while I was at the retreat center, and I picked all the fabrics, here, and I made 1 block. And then I had Jenny sign it, and I took it home and I quilted it, and it hangs up on the wall, in my sewing room. And the points are the worst. They're just, I would do much better now, right? But I'm so proud when I look at that, because I know where I came from, and I don't see the imperfections. I see where I started, and that will be in there forever, as because coming here was really a catalyst for a lot of the joy and excitement and community that I was able to find in quilting. I had a quilt, maybe my 2nd or 3rd retreat here. Susan Brown taught her binding tool star quilt pattern, which was really fun. And I started it, and I was so excited. I bought 2 jelly rolls. It was gonna be this huge queen size quilt. And I got a lot of progress done at the retreat, but then inevitably I set it to the side because I had so many gifts I wanted to make, for my family. And 4 years later, I actually picked it back up. So it was never something that I disliked or became disinterested in, but something for myself was really a low priority, right? And so, when I finally finished it and made it into a bed quilt, there's so many happy memories wrapped up in that, all those years in the past, and then, moving on to the future. And, of course, 4 years later, I'm a much more precise quilter now than I am then. And so that part was frustrating. But, I figured it out, and I said, I'm not throwing away what I did all those years ago. I'm finishing it. But there is something very personal about having picked that fabric here and, having made it with the quilt designer and, being surrounded by my friends. And that makes it really special to me to look at that one. And of course I picked my favorite colors, and, that one's really special too. Being able to use that creativity to give to other people, to be able to share, to show them my love in that way. That's how much I care, that I want to spend and invest hours upon hours in making something beautiful that you can sit underneath when you're watching TV with your family, or, sleep underneath, or go out on a picnic with, or, that is a huge part of the joy that we get from quilting, is the gifting. And when you know that person you love truly understands how much you invested in making something just for them. My name is Heather, and this is why I quilt.